Coming up on this Jerusalem Dateline, Benjamin Netanyahu calls for restraint as protests turn violent and demonstrations block major roads in Tel Aviv. Plus, the aftermath of the earthquakes in Turkey bring out the best and the worst in people. CBN's Operation Blessing is there through it all. We'll also look at the explosive growth of ISIS around the world and what that means for the Middle East and the West. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Julie Stahl. Ongoing protests against Benjamin Netanyahu's government have ramped up and turned violent, prompting the Prime Minister to call for calm on national television. Dubbed a National Day of Disruption, protesters blocked main roads and key junctions in Tel Aviv and around the country. Israelis have been protesting for weeks against the government's plan to overhaul the legal system and limit powers of Israel's high court.
So what we saw was a very chaotic scene in Tel Aviv. We saw police on horseback, water cannons, stun grenades. This is something that you do not normally see on Israeli streets.
The unprecedented violence led Netanyahu to address the press and the nation, calling on protesters not to cross red lines.
I know there are many citizens among you, lovers of the country, who enthusiastically support the legal reform. I also know that there are many citizens, also lovers of the country, who oppose the reform with the same enthusiasm. But in democracy, there are clear rules on how to conduct a debate.
In Jerusalem, protesters gathered outside Netanyahu's official residence, and Netanyahu's wife, Sarah, was prevented for 3 hours from leaving a hair salon in Tel Aviv when about 1,000 protesters surrounded the place. Opposition leader Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz called on them to back off so hundreds of police could rescue her.
We can't accept violence. We can't accept beating police officers. We can't accept blocking roads. We can't accept threats to public personalities and their families. A thing that is happening at this moment exactly in the heart of Tel Aviv. We will not accept breaking the rules and violence, not in Huwara, not in Tel Aviv, and not anywhere.
Netanyahu believes the two sides can find a way to talk and agree with each other.
We will not raise a hand against each other because we are brothers. We have no other country.
Meanwhile, 5 Knesset members, including 2 from Netanyahu's Likud party, called for consensus talks on judicial reform, proposed earlier by Israeli President Yitzhak Herzog. Israeli troops arrested 2 Palestinians suspected of involvement in the killing of an Israeli-American citizen during a recent terror attack. Footage released by the IDF shows troops conducting a daylight raid on a Palestinian refugee camp near the city of Jericho. Israeli leaders say the suspected terrorist gunned down 27-year-old Ilan Ganeles while he was driving to a friend's wedding. Ilan's family buried him in Israel. He is the latest death in a recent surge in terror attacks. The increase in terror attacks are raising concerns about the potential for another prolonged period of violence called an intifada. I recently talked with Rabbi Abraham Cooper from the Simon Wiesenthal Center about why the attacks are happening and what to expect in the coming weeks. Rabbi Abraham Cooper from the Simon Wiesenthal Center, welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline.
Thank you. It's good to be back in Jerusalem and on this wonderful program.
We've had a number of terror attacks recently. What's your reaction to that, and also to some of the Israeli response, very few numbers that have had a violent response to that? What's your reaction?
First and foremost, I think everybody here is holding their breath with Ramadan coming up, talks about a possible intifada, a whole new generation of young Palestinians who didn't experience the previous two, or they wouldn't even be thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And the incredible tragedies that were involved. The 2 brothers who were murdered on a main road in an Arab town, and just see 2 young people cut down for no reason. The young Palestinian terrorists who came at them has been basically brainwashed and poisoned, almost from birth, in this culture of death, fortified by the Palestinian authorities pay to slay, knowing that even when he gets caught or if he gets killed, his family will be well taken care of. And I think, especially for viewers in the United States, well, what can Americans do? The American taxpayer gives a ton of money to the Palestinians. And you want to change the equation? Basically, call up Abbas and say you have a law on your books that basically rewards terrorists and their families when they murder and maim Jews. We want the law rescinded publicly and an end to it, or we're going to reconsider how much money we're going to be sending. This is a moral blank check that has been handed to a corrupt institution. Unfortunately, it's the same script every time. Israel should promise this, Israel should do that, and we're going to do this for the Palestinian Authority, and et cetera, et cetera. And unfortunately, unless that equation changes, I don't see any real possibility of change.
Yeah, now let's hop over to the other side of the ocean. To the U.S., a group said they were organizing a National Day of Hate. What is that all about?
Christopher Wray, who's the head of the FBI, recently testified before Congress that 63% of all religious-based hate crimes in America target 2.4% of the population, American Jews. And many of those incidents are violent. And that's not even to delve into the fact that on social media, you have an echo chamber for anti-Semitism, for hatred, for terrorism on both sides of the Atlantic. The neo-Nazis and the white supremacists who know how to leverage social media, they posted something about this day of hate for the Jewish Sabbath. And law enforcement tried to reassure people. They had police cruisers going past synagogues in the major cities. Thank God there were no attacks, but you can see the psychological impact on the community. We know from history that, it begins with the Jews, it never ends with the Jews.
No, but you've been at a conference here.
Right, there's the annual global conference. You have people from dozens of countries, all the continents, about 200 participants with various sessions, including serious updates about Iran, some beautiful things about what Israeli NGOs are doing on a humanitarian basis in Africa. And I'm here to basically share some of my experiences and our ongoing commitment to deepen and expand the DNA of the Abraham Accords. So I've been involved both in the UAE and especially in Bahrain. We know which model we don't want to follow. Jordan, which signed, when the late King Hussein was alive, a peace treaty with its former enemy. And yet in recent months, you have Jewish and Israeli tourists coming across the border to go to the sites, having their personal religious items confiscated or sending people back. I would rather deal with the United Arab Emirates, who just opened the Abraham House, or frankly, Saudi Arabia, than deal with the current regime in Jordan. And I think it's an important guidepost. That's something that always motivates me. Governments sign treaties, people make peace.
Iran needs just 12 days to create enough nuclear material for a weapon. That's the testimony of a top Pentagon official who told the U.S. lawmakers during a recent congressional hearing. This doesn't mean Iran can actually produce a bomb in 12 days, but that it could soon have enough material to try developing a nuclear weapon. Last week, the International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed it detected uranium enriched to 83% purity at a facility in Iran. 90% enrichment is needed for weapons-grade uranium. Coming up, earthquake survivors in Turkey are facing robbery and other crimes. How Operation Blessing is helping them rebuild their lives in the midst of increasing danger. Millions of people are grappling with the aftermath of those devastating earthquakes in Turkey. Operation Blessing is on the ground helping survivors begin building their lives. But the situation is still often dangerous, and victims are now having to contend with crimes like robbery. Brody Carter has this report.
The topography in Turkey, it's absolutely breathtaking. There are no words to describe how pretty it is here. Unfortunately, on the antithesis side of things, that's exactly how it is. Looking at the devastation, the destruction, and the death left behind from 3 separate earthquakes.
And trying to rob as much as they can. People is getting desperate.
Danger in Turkey remains.
even after 3 quakes and numerous aftershocks rocked 10 historic cities.
There's been multiple earthquakes since we've been on the ground, so it got determined that it's not safe to stay inside.
We're here in the city of Hatay, the most devastated city recently as of Monday to be hit by Turkey's 3rd earthquake. What you're seeing behind me right now is the only road into the city. That means supplies coming in through this road have been very treacherously and also slowly coming into this warehouse, to Operation Blessing, which has now turned into a distribution center because of word of mouth.
The need is everything. These people have nothing. Most of them are living in tents or their cars. They have no hygiene products. Most of them left their house in the middle of the night because it happened while they were sleeping. They have no shoes on their feet. They have no socks. They have nothing.
IDP, internal displaced person.
And that's what's happened.
Turkish people are IDPs in this moment.
Estimates vary between 1 and 2 million people left homeless, like Hakan Hamaraku. He and his family now live in tents and temporary housing outside his dilapidated home. He's forced to stare at an unwanted yet familiar scene that has overtaken Turkey's beautiful landscape.
I threw my children and my wife from one room to another to escape, and it worked for us.
Tonight I'm making steaks. Oh, you're making steak tonight.
Even amid the chaos, Operation Blessing remains steadfast on its mission to help those suffering and share God's love with those in need.
We're here to help people first, water, shelter, food, medicine, But there's some people that has been asking for it. It's like, oh, you guys are Christian. Oh, can you pray for me?
Wow.
So it's like, it's very powerful too. It's not meaning that they are gonna, but the seed is being planted.
It has been weeks since the initial earthquake devastated the region. Thankfully, Operation Blessing has been on the ground since then, and they will continue to be for weeks to come. But they will leave. And when they do so, they're hopeful that they leave the tools behind needed here in Turkey so that the people who are struggling and suffering will one day be able to thrive and rebuild their lives. Brody Carter, reporting in Turkey, CBN News.
One of the biggest needs in Turkey is reliable medical care. Hundreds of thousands were injured and medical centers were destroyed in the quakes. Franklin Graham's organization, Samaritan's Purse, is operating a state-of-the-art field hospital inside one of the worst-hit areas. Chris Mitchell has the story.
After 2 massive earthquakes shook Turkey on February 6th, Samaritan's Purse deployed one of its state-of-the-art field hospitals to the hardest-hit area. In a disaster of this magnitude, time is of the essence. Within days, this hospital was on its way here to Hatay, Turkey, set up in less than 36 hours and 1 week after the earthquake, fully operational.
I like to say it's like we fly with a city. Everything that we bring on our plane, we're ready to go. And when we hit the ground, we bring everything we need. The only thing we really need is some sort of water and diesel. And if we don't have diesel, we know how to make it. And our goal is to set up within 24 to 72 hours max.
This is going to be our ICU step-down unit.
Media relations specialist Stephen Sneed set the scene for CBN News.
It's always amazing to see an empty parking lot turn into a life-saving facility such as our emergency field hospital.
Sneed says the hospital has served over 1,000 patients.
We've seen patients really across the board, so men, women, children. We've also seen people with infections. During the initial earthquake, a lot of people were wounded and injured, and with a lack of proper health care, there's been no way for them to really receive treatment in a timely manner.
The field hospital is set up next to an 1,100-bed facility put out of commission by the quake.
This was the main healthcare facility for this region, and now that it's no longer operable, we're really treating all of the needs from a healthcare perspective that exist. And so whether that's high blood pressure issues, whether it's respiratory issues, people not having access to their medications now that their homes have been destroyed. So across the board, we're just seeing everything.
The hospital provides 52 beds, 4 ICU units. It also includes an ER, pharmacy, lab, and operating rooms. all run by a team of nurses, support staff, and doctors like emergency room physician Dr. Chris Brandenburg.
For us, it's been a blessing to be here helping these people. They've been extremely appreciative to us. I'm thankful for Samaritan's Purse and all that they're doing, to treat these people, because when you talk about being a time of need for medical and trauma care, you're not going to get bigger than this.
They're providing medical care for patients like Hidayat Olk and Yusuf Khan.
They helped me a lot. I've never seen treatment like this before, so I feel really revived.
We have to thank all these people, this organization, and the hospital.
President and CEO Franklin Graham came to visit the facility.
What it does for your heart to see this team that's come from around the world, that's assembled doctors and nurses in Jesus' name, and to be able to help the people of Turkey. And we're so grateful for the help of the Turkish government, and all the agencies here in Turkey have been incredible to work with.
All the staff and facilities have one purpose.
A great opportunity to serve people that are hurting, bring in some hope and healing.
Graham says it's important to pray for the people of Turkey.
They're suffering. It's still cold at night. They're suffering. And just pray that God would allow us and the others to be able to reach them and help them to save life.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, at Samaritan's Purse Field Hospital, Hatay, Turkey.
Up next, terror experts warn that ISIS is growing again in the Middle East, why it could soon become a major threat to the West. Western intelligence agencies are bracing for a possible terror attack after a Danish politician publicly burned a Quran in Sweden last month. Dale Hurd has the story.
Protests erupted throughout the Islamic world after the public burning of a Quran in Sweden last month. Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said while the burning was deeply disrespectful, it was protected under freedom of expression. The Islamic State terror group on social media has called for revenge attacks on Christians worldwide. The Muslim holy month of Ramadan begins March 23rd, and last year's observance saw 42 ISIS terror attacks in just 3 days. The threat of ISIS has returned, and Western intelligence agencies are on the lookout for any signs of a terrorist attack. Security expert Eric Karen says that in the Middle East and Asia, ISIS never went away.
They have approximately 16,000 fighters between Iraq and Syria. They control 6 million people in that region. They have franchises throughout the world. We're talking probably around 25 franchises throughout Africa and Europe and here in America.
A recent United Nations report also shows the ISIS threat increasing. Terrorism expert Sargis Sengeri says while the U.S. had to defeat ISIS on the battlefield, that alone wasn't enough to stop the movement.
You have to kill folks on the battlefield to take ground. You have to do that. But I don't think we ever fought against the ideology that really resonates between the 6 inches of people's foreheads. So it will continue to fight and will continue to take territory. It will continue to force individuals to either convert or basically, die in the process.
Tina Ramirez with the humanitarian group Hardwired Global calls the resurgence of ISIS a nightmare for both Christians and Muslims in the Middle East.
ISIS used to hold court in the ancient churches in the city of Mosul and sentence Muslims, Christians, others to death, to having their hands or legs chopped off. And then the women, thousands of women that we know who've been sexually enslaved. So the trauma that the entire community went through was horrific.
ISIS is encouraging Muslims to use any method to kill Westerners, including trucks and nail guns. Karen believes the U.S. could be very vulnerable to a major terrorist attack.
On the southern border, the northern border is wide open. We know that there's over 55 million shipping containers that come into America. Less than 2% are examined. We need to take the gloves off and understand that this threat's not going away. It's only increased in the last few years. The idea that they don't want to attack us again like a 9/11, but even bigger, is foolish. They want to destroy America.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Still ahead, learning the spirit of entrepreneurship from Israel's founding fathers, how they used biblical principles and innovation to establish the modern state of Israel. Recently, we told you about an event in Jerusalem bringing together product innovators with investors who could help turn their ideas into reality. Some observers remarked about the spiritual nature of the gathering, which Paul Strand explains should be no surprise when you consider Israel's history.
A number of believers are uncomfortable mixing the Almighty and money. They point to scriptures such as Matthew 6, verse 24, that decrees you cannot serve both God and money. Entrepreneur John Medved, founder of Our Crowd, begs to differ. He says people, like those at this investor summit, need to examine the innovation and faith displayed by Israel's founding fathers and how that led to wealth. It goes all the way back to Abraham.
He was actually quite a successful businessman. He was, they say actually, even in Hebrew, he kaved b'tzon. He was heavy with flock. You know, whenever you talk about a guy who's like a heavy investor, Abraham was that kind of a person. His son Isaac drilled wells. He was a hydrologist. Okay, when you read the Bible, you realize that he was like Israel's first water expert. And his son, Jacob, was a biotechnologist. Remember what he did with his flocks in terms of changing their colors and stripes, okay, and how to breed them. His son, Joseph, was the mashbir, was this incredible private-public partner guy. He ran all of Egypt, which was the economic powerhouse of the time. So this goes all the way back into our DNA. This is what Israel is supposed to be doing.
Medved points out if people will follow these examples, walk in their own giftings, and strive to make the world a better place, God will bless their efforts. As the book of Proverbs puts it, great wealth is in the house of the righteous, and lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Paul Strand, CBN News, Jerusalem.
That's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. I'm Julie Stahl. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.